Own physical challenges pushing themselves to the limit in the African desert, the final chapter at 9. The story of royal photography before that, and the moment everything changed.
Up until the 1980s, royal photography was something of a gentleman's sport, a relatively civilized pursuit. An official engagement here, a bit of a tour there, nothing too challenging. And then, the heir to the throne found a girlfriend.
She was the answer to a photographer's prayer.
It was phenomenal. You didn't miss a thing she did.
This bashful teenage Sloane would soon shatter the press photography peace.
Oh, crikey, the rivalries in the press corps were extraordinary.
The gentlemen of the press pack turned into salivating hounds.
Punching each other in the face outside.
Elbows flying, there'd be cursing and swearing.
For 17 years, it was a roller coaster.
But the press were heading towards one spectacular derailment. They had whipped themselves up into an unsustainable frenzy. The hunters would soon find out what it was to be hunted.
Out. O-U-T, out.
I'd been there. I had been in pursuit of Diana.
Could the People's Princess ever be replaced?
If you published a photograph or a feature on Camilla, we would get complaints.
And could Clarence House manage the photographers and pull off a PR coup?
Second wife syndrome, first wife died, which is really bad.
Camilla's been with us a long while, but as the Wicked Witch, not as the fairy princess.
At the end of the 1970s, the British public was not too bothered about the private lives of the royals. The job of royal photographer inspired barely a stifled yawn.
I remember the Queen went on a state visit to Sweden, and there wasn't one member of the British press accompanying her. Not one TV crew, nothing. That's how boring and uninterested people were.
The relationship that the royals had with the press was more a kind of a mutual understanding that we reported what they did. They occasionally turned out to justify their existence to the taxpayer. And the press weren't that excited about them.
There weren't many of us photographing the royal family. I could go to a polo match at Windsor to photograph the Prince and be 20 feet from him while he sort of prepared, his horses and what have you.
Security was very low-key. You could park your car, you could pick up your cameras and walk sort of up within feet of the Prince of Wales, and he would chat to you and say hello. It was just very straightforward and very innocent. One of my first photographs was of Prince Charles up at Smith Lawn, and it was taken on a very old lens that I'd borrowed from my father. I could hardly lift it up, it was so long. It was like a bazooka, it was so long. I could just about lift it up. And he was just very casual, leaning on his polo pony. And it's not a technically fantastic picture, it's just sort of a little moment in time of a very relaxed young prince, and I think it just sums up how relaxed the atmosphere was in those days. And he was just a very carefree young man in those days, and it's just quite a nice sort of innocent picture, really.
This lovely bubble of innocence was about to be pricked. Everything was about to change for the carefree young prince.
I was up covering the Braemar Games, and on the morning of Braemar Games, Charles goes fishing. Just, the royals are such creatures of habit. So I went looking for him, and having been based up there, I knew the places to look. And I knew where the pools were, where you had to leave your car by the roadside and walk 50 yards through the trees. And I walked 50 yards through the trees at one of the spots, there Charles was, a girl beside him, turned her back and went and hid behind a tree. I took a few photographs of her climbing up with her back towards me and got behind a tree. The next thing I saw was a compact with a mirror on it, and she was using it to see where I was and continued to walk up this bank, keeping the tree between me and her so I couldn't photograph her. I thought, my God, who's this?
Looking through the story of photography in the royals and trying to identify the key moments of change, key moments of transition, undoubtedly the arrival of Diana on the scene changed things forever.
I think Princess Diana was an absolute walking photo opportunity at a time when lots of other royals couldn't get themselves photographed.
She was very pretty, blushed like fury when you photographed her, put her head down, but would squint up under her fridge to see where you were, and she gave this big doe-eyed, shy girl look from that. But she was very capable and quite smart.
young, beautiful, glamorous. She fueled the photographers. I'm not sure how do you begin to describe that relationship.
She was so photogenic, absolutely. She was the answer to a photographer's prayer.
There was definitely a before and after moment. I would probably home in on that photograph of her backlit holding the child when she was still working in the kindergarten.
Halfway through photographing her in this little park, the sun came out, and it was just brilliant. You know, the whole picture came alive.
This was a girl just appeared in the public eye, and we loved her for it. You know, she was natural, she was unaffected, and she was a very, very pretty girl.
She then became the most important member of the royal family, whether you liked it or not. It was phenomenal. You didn't miss a thing she did. If she went to a school in East London, or if she went to Argentina, you went because you couldn't afford not to, because she was going to make great pictures.
That was typical of Diana. There she was, she's done up in goggles and hats, and, you know, she would just giggle. She was just such a fresh young thing at the time, and she would see the funny side of everybody walking about wearing silly hats and outfits and so on.
And it was just this revelation, you know, oh my God, somebody in the royal family is human.
She was incredibly photogenic. She had all the ingredients to become a star through photography. She wasn't at ease, she wasn't natural in television contexts. The painted portraits that we know of her just don't capture that spark, that energy, that really seductive appeal that we see in the still photography.
The rivalries in the press corps were extraordinary. There would be fist fights, there would be elbows flying, there would be cursing and swearing.
The times I've opened my hotel door in the press hotel and they'd all be fighting, punching each other in the face outside, and the lies we used to all tell each other were unbelievable. The lies, the stories we would concoct. We would physically hide behind pillars and things and make out we weren't there. I mean, all sorts of, you know, I mean, it was almost like a comedy show at times.
When we'd gone abroad with Charles, there's maybe 4 or 5 photographers travelled from the UK with him. With Charles and Diana, or Diana or on, there would be 70 or 80 and a waiting list of 200.
There were hard tours, they were long. I remember one of the first major tours was 6 weeks in Australia. And what was remarkable, I think, about that trip was daily papers published those pictures every single day without fail, didn't miss a day. There was that much interest.
I can remember the press secretary pleading with the photographers, would someone please go and take a picture of Prince Charles? But there was no point in sending a picture to London that didn't have Princess Diana in it. You would just be wasting your time, wasting their time, wasting money sending it because they just wasn't interested.
No one could have predicted the impact that this blushing adolescent was to cause. Press photographers threw off their comfy slippers and transformed themselves from complacent slouchers into hungry, ruthless predators. And as the price on a Diana photograph grew and grew, so did the lengths to which these snappers would go to hunt down their exclusives.
I had the biggest lens I'd ever handled in my life. It was a 2000mm with a 3x doubler on it. So it was big and ugly. I took the photographs over 1.5 miles away. My camera was tied to a mangrove tree at the front of it. It had a tripod in the middle and a monopod at the back end of it. Diana came onto the beach, James Whittaker's beside me, and he's watching through his binoculars, and Diana came onto the beach wearing a sarong. Within seconds, the sarong came off and she was wearing a little bikini. There she is, got her? I said, yep, got her. James just said, oh, shit. And when these pictures published, all hell let loose. Nobody'd ever seen a royal in a bikini before.
I can remember coming back to London and there being an absolute bedlam here. There's questions being asked in the House about intrusion, and there were other editors of other newspapers condemning the Sun on the radio. And even when I got to the office of the Sun, the office driver just spat on the floor as I walked in, as I was dirt on his boots.
the Queen's issued a statement saying this is the blackest day in British journalism, and it's been raised in Parliament. The editor's been fired. Now, what? It's a huge controversy. We were playing this massive game at the time, and you know, we were caught up in this very glamorous girl, and up until then, nobody had got into any kind of trouble. There had been the odd detective getting shirty, or the odd press editor getting shirty because people had been pushy in front of them, but nobody had ever got in trouble for photographing them. And I was the first, and you know, that was the egg was broken at that stage, and we had to live with the omelette rather than being the pretty egg.
After the flesh-bearing bikini shots, the only person not blushing or retreating in shame was Diana. For her, the intrusion wasn't embarrassing, it was empowering. She was beginning to discover how powerful a picture could be.
I'm sure Princess Diana studied her photographs. Everyone else in that racket studies their photographs all the time, so it'd be astonishing if she didn't. And she learnt, if I do that, how about it? And because she was an instinctive person, she had EI, emotional intelligence, she understood what people were thinking and what people wanted in a way that more formally cleverer people wouldn't.
One of my first pictures I ever took of her walking along the street in London, she looked so young and so naive, and from that girl that I first photographed to the woman she became was just two different people totally.
Even in what appeared to be the most casual photograph, she would say, "You want that, don't you?"
The Princess was on the stage at a Red Cross meeting, and I got a seat right in the front row. She looked down, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I need you to do this. Do you see the haircut?" So she went like that, looking right as obviously terribly interested in the speaker, and then she did that, and then this smirk came across her face, knowing that, you know, here she was, hundreds of people in the hall, and she was doing a photo session.
Diana clearly learnt very quickly the importance of the relationships between herself and photographers. She learnt how to pose, she learnt how to work with photographers, and she realised the extent to which she could control and guide the image that was going to be created of her.
I remember once in Toronto, the Royal Yacht and was berthed there, and they were on an official tour, and William and Harry were flown out to join them.
We were quite a long way away, looking up at the Royal Yacht, which was, you know, a pretty big vessel to look at from a distance. And the doors flew open one end, and out came William and Harry. And you could just see them because they were quite little, you know, you could only just see sort of their chins upwards across the edge of the ship. And they stood there and they were sort of like hopping around all excited because their mum and dad had arrived.
Of course, it's all protocol, all these things, and the Admiral was there to greet them, as he always is, any member of the royal family. And he salutes, and Prince Charles was saluting, but Diana didn't bother with that. She just ran past him and saw the boys and threw her arms out. I remember she was wearing this red and white check jacket, and she threw her arms out really wide and just hugged the boys.
Well, on that occasion, I had an autofocus that I was trying for a new camera, you know, coming, the autofocus, and because all of us photographers were being very snobby about it, saying, autofocus, what sort of professional uses one of those? And none of us would touch them. Anyway, this camera was fantastic because she had a very, very bright check jacket on. The autofocus loved it. It locked on her and it followed her so that every picture I took was in focus, whereas my colleagues were shooting without one and they couldn't get it. They had the content in the frame, but they couldn't focus, so they didn't get the picture.
To look at it, you'd think that Diana hadn't seen the boys for a year. In fact, it was 8 days.
The fact is, Prince Charles did his duty. He spoke to the Admiral, walked in, and of course, the next day it was, you know, Diana, wonderful pictures of her, but of course Charles hugged them too, and Charles kissed them too. And, you know, he was then got this label as a cold father.
Unfortunately for Charles, as the marriage visibly nosedived, it became a custody battle for public affection. Winning it would come down to image, and in that respect, Charles was totally outclassed.
It's very difficult and to speculate on how knowing or how, one might even say manipulative, Diana might have been in setting up situations for the camera. She knew how powerful a photograph could be. One is reminded of that photograph of her seated alone and melancholic in front of the Taj Mahal.
This is towards the end of the marriage. This, I think, was in '92. And Prince Charles was going off to sign all these, or to witness all these billion-dollar contracts that British business had fought and won in India. And nobody went. You know, everybody went with Diana to the Taj Mahal, and Prince Charles flew off to this city with an empty plane. All the seats that were booked for the press were empty.
It was a magnificent, superb photograph. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew when it was going to be published. She, you know, it was this lonely, tragic figure who had been betrayed by a husband who was 12 years older than her, and a mistress who was known as the Wicked Witch, the most vilified woman in Britain, if not the world. Yeah, it was a brilliant photo opportunity, and my golly, she milked it for all it was worth.
She was also very good on a couple of the royal tours that I went on. He would be talking to somebody, and she'd do this. She'd go... She'd just sort of turn her head to one side and look very sort of bored or melancholy. And of course, that she knew again that was the ideal picture, that we could all go, is there a rift in the royal marriage? And it was quite clear by then that there was.
Diana used the press to her own means, and very cleverly. And one of the most startling ones was the night that Prince Charles was going on to confess about himself and Camilla. Diana turned up at the Serpentine Gallery wearing a Caroline Walker dress that had been in her wardrobe for nearly 2 years, and she looked sensational. So instead of Charles being in the front page, looking like an old fogey, talking about having an affair with Camilla, Diana stole his thunder, and she used the press perfectly to do it. She'd been one of the world's great PRs if she'd ever been let loose on us.
But using the press during the breakdown of one's marriage is a Faustian pact. You can never use them more than they will use you.
Out. O-U-T, out.
There are certain elements of the paparazzi. I think they just take it too far. You know, it's unfortunate when I think they pursue too far. They push the boundaries just too much.
You shouldn't have to fear a photographer. He should be a bit of a nuisance, but you should possibly know him by name, and you should know that, you know, if your car broke down, he would be the guy there to help push it. Not that he would take full advantage all the time of everything that happened to you.
I wasn't enjoying the job anymore, you know, all the sort of background problems with the paparazzi and the access to taking pictures, the frustrations of it. And obviously she wasn't happy. You could see she wasn't happy, you know, obviously everything was going wrong with the marriage. And, you know, she was a very unhappy person to photograph. I wasn't enjoying it. She obviously wasn't enjoying it. And it sort of came to a sort of point where you just thought, oh, I want a break from this. You know, I felt uncomfortable being there.
With her marriage over, Diana had her future as a demoted royal to consider and would need to work out what form that ex-royal image should take. As it happened, she didn't have to look very far.
She looked at the cover of Vogue magazine, and there was a photographer called Patrick de Marchalier who was starting to do these very natural photographs on beaches of, you know, models, probably weren't their children, someone's child that they'd borrowed, but that whole sort of mother-child thing, very natural, very beautiful. Saw that and she thought, I'll have him, he can do my pictures. And those pictures were a massive turning point in royal photography, because it could have graced the pages of Vogue, and not because of who she was, but because of how stunning she looked in them.
Patrick de Marchallier's pictures of Diana, I think, they're wonderful, they're beautifully lit.
He's got a great atmosphere. She's with him the whole time. I just think they're magical. I think he's done some of the best pictures, actually.
At the end of 1996, Diana lost her HRH title. No longer part of the firm, she made the point clear with a spectacular public shedding of her royal skin. She auctioned her clothes off for charity. To promote the sale, Diana commissioned a photographer who had never taken a royal photograph in his life. The portrait session that followed would very quickly become the most successful and iconic photo shoot of her life.
I think we're used to royal portraits that are quite stiff in a way, no? That was the association to aristocracy and to nobility, was the stiffness, you know, not to ever be seen off guard. And in a way, I mean, I've said this often, but in this period of Princess Diana, she had just lost Her Royal Highness to her title. And in a way, I guess she could give up that formality a bit. You know, she could be a little bit more like any of us. So much of it was good. You know, when you look back, you think, wow, this woman really looked amazing. I wouldn't say she's perfect physically, but the energy, the personality was magical.
She wanted to say, I'm doing very nicely, thank you, in my new world. I'm doing very nicely, thank you, post-divorce. I'm now, as Americans would say, I've moved on.
The pictures are truly relaxed. They are both incredibly beautiful and stylish and sophisticated, but wonderfully relaxed. And that is a very, very hard mix to achieve. It is Mario Testino's strength to be able to create that mood, and I'm sure Diana knew that, and she knew how to just go with the moment and give herself up to the process.
De Marchalier had made her look very natural and very beautiful. Testino made her look sexy, but again, not in a very obvious way. I think they were the first pictures of Diana where men looked at them and sort of went, oh, you know, she looked great.
He knows exactly what he's doing, but what he's doing is going with the moment. And he knows how to relax into it and not worry too much about focus or depth of field or what's happening with the light, and just trust that his instinct, his energy will bring something out of his subject, that the moment will become magical and he will fix it on film. And he pulls it off.
You know, it's funny for me, when I trained as a photographer, you get so many rules of how a good photograph is supposed to be. She's supposed to be sharp, the composition has to be perfect, the light, the this, and sometimes you realize that all those rules are meant to be broken, really, because in this picture, even though it doesn't have the qualities that maybe other pictures have that are beautiful, quality, beautiful, for me, it's for me one of my favorites, you know. I'm a sucker for joy, you know, for happiness, for excitement. I would love my life to be like that on a full-time basis.
She managed to capture the look of the moment, her moment and the moment. Lots of women looked at that and thought, that's how I want to look. And normally, people don't think that about royal ladies now.
For 17 years, it was a roller coaster. You know, you either got on or you stayed off. And if you got on, it was a very much up and down. You know, one minute she was in a great mood, and the pictures were like you couldn't believe it. The pictures were just sensational. Another day, she had a face on her that you could chop wood with. You know, you'd know you're getting nothing. You know, and it was. I mean, she'd have you ordered out the room, even if you were the rota. You know, the pool. She wouldn't care. And one of the saddest things I think I can remember in my whole life is were those last pictures of Diana walking through the revolving doors at the Ritz Hotel the night she died. And she had that face on her that you knew she was in bad temper, bad humour, you know. So That is not a nice for me thinking that she was like that when she died.
It is a point to remember that of all the ironies about Diana, perhaps the greatest was this. A girl given the name of the ancient goddess of hunting was, in the end, the most hunted person of the modern age. She would want us today to pledge ourselves to protecting her beloved boys, William and Harry, from a similar fate. And I do this here, Diana, on your behalf. We will not allow them to suffer the anguish that used regularly to drive you to tearful despair.
On the Saturday of the funeral, I felt really tense, miserable, and when I heard Charles's speech, I was shocked. I'd been there. I had been in pursuit of Diana. And I think a lot of us felt guilty and wished for a happy ever after.
I did go back to photograph Diana's funeral. It was a very difficult decision because I didn't really want to do it. You know, my first reaction was that I don't want to do it. I want to lock myself away. I don't want anyone to think I'm a photographer, and you know, because everybody was very anti-photographer at that point. And so, you know, I had not intended to do it, but I did in the end. My sort of father talked me into doing it, and he said, you know, this has been a big part of your life. You photographed this woman, and it's been very historical, and whatever your feelings are as a professional, you must go and photograph the end of the story. It was a bit of a blubbering mess all day, and thank goodness for autofocus, because I had my autofocus on and I didn't have to focus too much. Being very emotional. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, it was, you know, it was someone I'd worked with for so long. You know, I found it very distressing, and you know, I couldn't be that sort of cold, cool professional on the day. You know, that wasn't me at all. But anyway, I photographed it, and it was a day I will never ever forget.
I got a phone call. I was walking around Hyde Park photographing the flowers outside Kensington Palace. And I got a phone call from one of the Prince's press officers to say that he and Prince William and Prince Harry were going to come and look at the flowers outside Kensington Palace, and would I shoot the pool on that? I shot these pictures, and it was amazing how they coped with the crowd and looking at that scene. And then I got back to my office, and one of the girls who worked for me was working on the pictures on the screen. I said, could I have a look? And there was a picture of, I find it very hard to talk about it. There was a picture of Prince Harry, and his face was so creased up. He was on the point of just collapsing. And I turned to Melissa, who worked for me then. I said, has this picture gone out? We've got to kill this picture. I just cannot put this picture out.
Following Diana's death, the public needed a scapegoat and immediately looked towards the paparazzi and the press. The royal photographers realized that this time it was their own public image that needed some careful work.
When we lost Diana, the whole thing changed. For a start, they opened up all the windows at Buckingham Palace and let the fresh air in. They employed proper press officers that were positive about getting good publicity for the royal family, not just being arrogant and saying, we don't discuss that, and putting the phone down on you. You know, these were people that are there to help you.
This newfound cooperation may well have been through gritted teeth, but they had little choice. With Charles Spencer's words still ringing in their ears, the press knew they were under scrutiny. Everyone was waiting to see how they would handle the fragile young heirs.
These pictures paint a portrait of Prince William at a new turning point in his life. At Eton, he's enjoyed almost total protection from the press, and he was coaxed into allowing this degree of access as a way of saying thank you.
Prince William didn't like the press. He didn't like the media. and he certainly didn't trust any of them. But they agreed to leave him alone during his school years. And this generosity didn't go unnoticed. As a reward for their altruism, Clarence House gave one lucky photographer a commission to take some pictures to mark William's 18th birthday.
He was enthusiastic about it. He had ideas of his own. And obviously between myself and the television crew who we would work together and try and record and create a set of photographs which would illustrate William's time at Eton. And they were really as a thank you to the media for leaving him alone, for giving him the privacy that he needed at school. My favourite photograph out of the entire set is the black and white photograph of William walking down the corridor. We were just walking around school. It was the easiest thing to do. We said, right, let's go for a wander. We've got a bit of time spare. Let's just walk, talk, and see what happens. The light was particularly good. It was a lovely soft light that came in through the cloisters. And when I looked back, I thought, well, this could actually make a picture.
The press had behaved. The deal had worked. It had worked so well that they agreed to stay away for another 4 years while Prince William was at college. And again, in return, they were rewarded with a photo opportunity in his final year.
Before William went to university, I doubted very much whether William would continue as a member of the royal family. I thought he hated it. He hated everything to do with the media. He hated the fact that he was in this electronic goldfish bowl on show to everyone. But since he had those 4 years when he was media-free, when everybody stuck to the deal and left him alone to make his mistakes in private, it's turned him into a superb young man. And I think he's now embraced this role that he has, and he does it with great enthusiasm.
Being out of the limelight during those bad-skin, wobbly hormone years was a blessing for the princes. William and Harry emerged more confident and more in control of their image. And when it came to obligatory birthday portraits, if history and their mother had taught them anything, it was that there could only be one photographer for the job.
The Testino picture of Harry on his 21st was fantastic. It's just really natural. He looks like a 21-year-old. He doesn't look like some kind of staid old fart, and he's sort of leaning on a motorbike, very sort of Steve McQueen, Great Escape, and again, that's so much better than him sort of sitting on a box in full regalia.
He made them look sort of Top Gun-ish. I think Testino was very good at making people look Top Gun-ish. So it's a latter-day sort of teen swoon idol thing.
Testino's portraits managed to be very relaxed and very engaging. And clearly the royals realised that that is something that a very big public will respond very favourably to. They want to see that warmer human side of the royals.
It's a hard line because you have to keep that tradition and at the same time let it live and breathe in, the airs of today. We can't expect the entire English population to be allowed to change, but the royals have to stay as wax figures. It just doesn't mean anything. I think they have to go with the times.
I think a good, relaxed photograph of the royal family, it's always in the eyes. You can see when they're comfortable with the photographer, which is why Snowdon and Litchfield always got great pictures, because they knew him and there was a warmth there that there might not have been with other photographers. When they try and say, hey, don't we look relaxed, it doesn't work.
Testino was an interesting choice for Prince Charles, and I'm not sure it was wholly successful, because I think it's probably Prince Charles's fault rather than Testino's. I'm sure Prince Charles thought, me doing a real thing, feeding the chickens, will be convincing and sympathetic. And most people in the real world don't feed chickens. And they don't feed chickens in the way that Prince Charles actually appeared to be doing it. The whole composition sort of slightly uncomfortable.
I don't think Prince Charles has any clue about his image. I don't think he has any interest in his image. You know, he's been wearing the same safari suit on foreign tours for about 500 years. You know, he's very aristocratic like that. If he could, I'm sure he'd come out with the same old jacket, you know, with the frayed arms and the frayed collar if he was allowed to. He just has no self-image at all, which is part of his charm. I mean, where Prince Charles has probably used PR effectively for the very first time is in the introduction of Camilla into his life.
I think at the beginning, I mean, there was a lot of hostility towards her, and as I say, if you published a photograph or a feature on Camilla, we would get complaints.
Second wife syndrome, first wife died, which is really bad kind of scenario to deal with, you know, just ask Heather Mills McCartney or whatever she's called. You come along and you're the bad person. And of course, Camilla also had an affair with Prince Charles whilst he was married to Princess Diana, so double bad person. So her reinvention has been quite astonishing.
We did start using photographs of her in Hello. Not with Charles, though. They were never together. But it was obvious that she was becoming very important. You know, she wasn't just going to be going away.
The first step in the PR campaign was to come out and be seen together in public. The moment was chosen, and Clarence House gave the press a less than subtle tip-off. His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales and his escort Miss Parker Bowles might possibly be leaving the Ritz around, say, exactly 11:55 on Friday the 29th of January. Arthur Edwards had his ladder at the ready.
When Camilla did the first picture with Camilla and Charles at the Ritz, you know, I was there on the Wednesday morning at 10:30, and the job wasn't till the Friday evening. And by the time Friday evening came, there must have been 500 people there.
This was the picture event of the decade, and no self-respecting royal photographer was going to miss it for the world.
Half of Fleet Street's presses won't run until about midnight tonight, so there's a lot of editors sitting back there with goosebumps right now. There's a lot at stake, as you can imagine.
For the gentlemen of the press, this was like the glory days spent pursuing front-page-worthy royals. The fun had returned.
We did a ring round as soon as the first ladder went down.
Yeah.
We all phoned each other, and it ended up, I think the core five of us ended up with that prime position.
Yeah.
And you were right, by the end there were 97 ladders outside the door of the Ritz, and we had the 5 best spots.
At last. You know, we never dreamt that this would ever happen, really. I mean, it was amazing, and the amount of photographers there and the flash bulbs were just going off everywhere. I mean, it was blinding. It must have been blinding for them, but it was great, you know, because the first time they appeared together.
It was a phenomenal success. The photographers lapped it up. The papers lapped it up. The public lapped it up. But this wasn't the get-out-of-jail card Camilla and Charles might have hoped for. They still had work to do.
Camilla's been with us a long while, but as the Wicked Witch, not as the fairy princess.
I mean, when you think back to April 2005, there was a wave of indifference and indeed outright hostility to Camilla and to the idea of them getting married.
This was the woman that, you know, 2 years ago was called the Rottweiler, and the other woman and the third person in the marriage.
But 6 years after the Ritz photo session, the opportunity finally arose for the one photograph that was going to secure for Camilla the very thing she and Charles had been working towards all that time: public acceptance.
When the blessing ceremony had finished, into that sort of spring sunshine came a radiant Duchess of Cornwall and a smiling Prince of Wales. And they looked so happy and so content. And they looked like the weight of the world had been lifted off their shoulders.
I mean, she looked fantastic in her wedding dress when she came out of the church. And I think that warmed a lot of women to her. They thought, God, she scrubbed up quite well there, you know, she looks good.
It's such a simple photograph. There's nothing complex about it, photographically. And it just made one of those royal pictures that makes you smile and you sort of realise, yes, you've got what you came for.
At the moment, she's being brought along very cleverly by Prince of Wales's public relations team at Clarence House, and she is rarely seen out on her own. She is nearly always with her husband and in support of her husband, and she is being quite brilliant at that, I have to say.
I think what Camilla is doing is working towards creating the two of us. It's the two of us photography, it's consort photography, and I think she's very carefully avoiding being a one-off look at me star, because I think that's the precedent you're working against. That's the Diana precedent. She's saying, I'm a proper consort, I'm a proper wife.
When photographing the most photographed family in the world, it can be difficult to catch something extraordinary. When they do, the photographers are rewarded for their skill and serendipity at the annual Picture Editors Awards.
The point, I guess, is to allow photographers to feel good about what they do and to have their work judged by a jury of their peers.
The royal category, it's exactly what it says. It's a picture which features a member of the royal family. It will have to be an absolutely cracking picture. It's one of the most popular categories going, and the 4 pictures tonight are absolutely superb pictures, which on their day, any photographer here in any category would have been pleased to have taken.
So what is considered a good royal photograph today?
With royal photography, a great picture will be someone looking at you, which is very important. A nice clean background, probably them smiling. Might seem like very sort of easy things to get, but quite a lot of the time it's not. I think it was sort of a combination of luck, of getting all those facts, getting the ball in the picture, Harry looking sort of quite determined, and I think it all just sort of came together in one shot.
A lot of it is down to having a sharp eye and a good lens. He was in focus, and he was looking straight down the barrel of my camera, which was even better. And it was the frame either side of that, couldn't use it because you couldn't see him.
Captured the Queen in an instant, but she's only as human as we all are. It's just a different angle to what you normally will see the Queen as.
There seems almost a wish amongst photographers and editors to take the pomp and circumstance out of royal and maybe catch candid and humorous moments.
A lot of royal photography these days is trying to make an extraordinary person look ordinary, and that involves trying to catch an expression that a normal person would do. A lot of it is just making these people look normal. I wanted a picture of the Queen walking through a doorway in profile and only her in focus, everything out of focus. She surprised me by not walking through the doorway, but standing just slightly inside the doorway. I couldn't see her at all, but the photographers who were in the proper position were firing away, and I was thinking, I've lost this. I've completely lost this. I might as well just go home now. But unbeknownst to me, the person behind her said to the Queen, can you just, Your Majesty, if you'd like to look to your left, you'll see what we've done in this room. And she quickly poked her head round. She came into my vision for a split second. I fired my flash, and she ducked her head back very quickly. I didn't even know if I had the picture until I looked at the back of the camera, and luckily, looking straight at me, miraculously in focus. It was a great shot, yeah.
And so to the awards. Our first category of the evening is the Fujifilm Royal Photographer of the Year. And it's this candid portrait of the monarch and her consort wins the award for Karwai Tang, Alpha Press Agency. He collects a cheque for £1,000.
These pictures suggest that while the salacious pap shots of half-dressed royals have been largely consigned to history, we still seem to like candid photographs, but not intrusive ones. We want a glimpse of the royals as real people, but not at the cost of their dignity. On the morning of the Queen's 80th birthday, the usual suspects arrive early to bag a good spot in the press pen.
I am outstanding, actually. Well, I'm outstanding most mornings. But when there's a bigger royal event in Windsor, I'm even better, because it's going to be really good later when the Queen walks out of there.
This morning was an early, like 4:30 a.m. up, and I was here by about 6, just to make sure of the position. That is routine for all of us. I mean, we need to be here early.
Tim Graham, you know, is one of my best friends, but occasionally he gets a little bit lippy with me, you see, and I have to put him in his place.
The most exciting picture already is that one just there, inflatable corgi. We've all done it. not to the lengths of that though.
You'd love to be inside, what you're doing, you know, just looking at her opening her cards and talking to President Bush and John Howard and all that. You'd love that, but you can't have everything, so we'll settle for this.
As with all royal walkabouts, the photographers are herded into positions carefully chosen by palace officials to give the snappers the best angle on her royal birthiness. At least that's the idea. But the press aren't always chuffed with their allocated pen. Where they think they should go and where the palace put them isn't necessarily the same place.
Let's go down a little bit, just a little bit. You're right in the way. Come on.
I've taken on.
Actually see the Queen on the birthday moment. Well, you can move down if you want. If we was there, we can't see the Queen equally as well.
It's not my fault, I'm sorry. The Buckingham Palace have set this up, not me. I'm
in a situation where we cannot see the Queen.
The wily Arthur Edwards, however, doesn't complain about his position. He just changes it.
I shot down off the steps to get alongside the car because I thought the Queen was going to get in the car there.
If you're on your own, you can sometimes sneak into somewhere where, you know, you're not supposed to be, or you're just getting into a better position.
Of course, my colleagues saw me there. They all tried to come. The police stopped them, and they said, "Oh, Lee's there." And of course, I got hauled out by the police.
Should we go photograph now?
Well, I was doing all right there till the new lot bloody worked out for me. They grassed me up, the dirty rats, but, you know, I'd have done it to them, so I can't complain. You know, this is a dog-eat-dog situation, and they certainly... But I got away with 1 or 2 pictures before they caught me, so that wasn't too bad.
For those who towed the line and didn't get what they wanted, there are only excuses.
Just trying to handhold the big lens, and that's you feel the weight of that. You're trying to handhold that, and you're working at sort of distance of several hundred yards, trying to get the picture of the Queen with the crown. It's extremely heavy, and trying to keep a good steady photograph.
The real nail-chewing moment comes when the pictures are zipped off to the editors, and the photographer discovers whether or not he's pulled off a corker.
It's a nice portrait. It's the sort of portrait you want for birthday day. It's just the way it goes sometimes. You think, well, have I got anything great? But then you come back and you find there is something there better than you thought. Sometimes it's the other way around. You think you've got something good and it proves not to be as special.
You know, the Queen is always aware where the press is. She's no fool. She knows exactly where you are. And she's not going to look straight at you and say, "You're getting a good picture, Arthur." But she's going to look in your direction and she's going to smile. And I was looking at some of these pictures really close, you know. I don't know what she puts on her face. I hope she gives me a bucket load one day, because I really like to look like that at 80.
There's a really nice picture here on the walkabout. I just like this because she's a very sort of lively face. The crowd's all laughing with her. And the only way I could get that was for leaning way out of the press pen and sort of shooting down the walkabout. That immediately blocks everyone else behind me. But that's tough. Yeah, they do exactly the same. And it made, for me, my nicest walkabout picture today.
The question is, whose picture will be the one that gets tomorrow's front page?
That's quite a nice picture. I really like that one. That's a real... this one's a real cracking smile, so... I think the Queen's smile is the picture. But who knows? I'm not the editor.
Now, Ian Jones has had quite a few front pages this week. Today I don't think so. There's so many pictures from so many angles.
2 days later, the photographers returned to Windsor to wait for the royal birthday party to spill out of St George's.
Good morning. Lovely day.
What was the last thing you said to us on Friday?
Something about no, I didn't have a front page picture. Sorry, James. Yeah,
You did?
I know, did.
Oh.
I was very lucky. I suppose one of them just sort of fit the bill for the day, really.
Despite the struggles over the last 50 years, the press and the royals seem to have reached a truce. The paparazzi have been largely banished to celeb land, leaving the royal press photographers to give us the candid but respectful pictures we seem to want. And since this birthday is a bit of a biggie, the palace have called upon old favourite Lord Snowdon to take the official portrait.
Interestingly, on the latest Snowdon photograph, she went to him for the first time ever, because he's not been well and he's having trouble walking. So she went to his house, which was great, nice touch, and again, a very, very relaxed photograph of the Queen. There's always something in her eyes, a warmth in her eyes when she's photographed by Snowdon that is missing with photographers that she doesn't have any relationship with.
Snowdon's would have been the only official portrait commissioned for the Queen's 80th. But a daring phone call from one octogenarian to another made this royal birthday stand out as quite distinct from any other.
Sort of slightly frivolous remark. Hadn't wished I hadn't opened my mouth. I said, why not get one 80-year-old to photograph another 80-year-old?
It was Jane's own idea. She, being 80 herself, she decided that wouldn't it be a bit of fun if she shot the Queen for her 80th birthday. And then, of course, when the news came from the Palace press office that they supported the idea, her confidence nearly failed.
I could have kicked myself. It was just so frivolous at the time.
It was perhaps surprising that the palace agreed to let Jane take a portrait of the Queen. She works in a very informal way. She uses a 40-year-old manual camera, black and white film, and shoots in available natural light.
I think what she does, which is deeply insightful portraits of people, it's almost like the camera tour is incidental.
I'm just a one-shot photographer, really. There's only just one in the bag, and then I'm fine. I don't want dozens. But I work on instinct. And I think I'm very alert. I think I'm very alert, and I'm very quick, and I'm very beady. So I can spot any little eccentricity or off-guard moment. I think that's probably where I am good.
There's, on the face of it, I mean, technically and in terms of props, there's nothing to her pictures. They are pictures of the utmost simplicity, and in a sense that's the hardest thing to pull off in photography.
In a conversation with Jane one day, I was trying to sort of figure out, because it's very complicated to figure out what she does, because on the face of it, technically, it seems so simple, and yet she comes back with extraordinary images of people, which are deeply respectful. And I was pushing her on this one day, and she said, Luke, when I look through a lens and I see the person and they look back at me, I absolutely love them for that minute, and then I'm gone.
I like light in the eyes. So, I mean, you know, the lighting, that, I mean, it was perfect. So, when I'd got that light there, I was home and dry, you know. And I had to work on it as quick as I could.
I find it one of the most tender and touching and engaging photographs that I have ever seen of Queen Elizabeth. It's a beautiful, very simple, but a beautiful and very warm portrait.
I mean, royal photography is by definition a formal kind of way of representing. It's about the monarch and how he or she wants themselves to be represented to the world. Jane can do that, but what she managed to do with the Queen was do a proper Jane Bound portrait, which catches this nice sort of informal moment, and the Queen's side face looking downwards with these sort of nice hazy elements in the background and strong contrast, beautiful light, a classic Jane portrait.
It would seem that in going along with the whim of an 80-year-old celebrity snapper, the Queen has once again chanced upon a rare moment of clarity in the projection of her image. Just as Cecil Beaton did for the Queen Mother after the abdication crisis in the 1930s, and Mario Testino did for Diana after her divorce from Prince Charles, these are pictures that manage to pull off that elusive combination of majesty and humanity, a balance that has, for the past half-century, been the grail of royal photography.
I think the history of royal photography over the last 50 years is all about keeping the balance between the imagery that you can control and the stuff that you can't. I think it's a constant struggle for the royal family. On the one hand, tapping into modern demotic themes without compromising their dignity, without letting in too much light on magic, but at the same time saying, I'm part of this world, I relate to this world, and it relates to me.
It becomes a question of careful management of the marketing of the royal image and the individual members of the royal family. And clearly, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth is at the absolute centre of this. Her image is ultimately the most important one, and she seems to have managed the way it has been presented with extraordinary skill.
We are now entering a new era of royal photography. The pressure to modernise and justify their relevance has kept these royals on their image-conscious toes, and once again, they are bracing themselves for the next big challenge. The sharp-eyed scrutiny of press and public will soon fix upon one young man and his far-from-certain future.
I think Prince William is very much the white hope as far as royal photographers are concerned. They are looking for a star to replace his mother.
I think, ultimately, Prince William will learn how to work with photographers. It's absolutely central to doing his job now. He will learn that.
William has now really matured and has taken on the mantle of, well, I am going to be the King of England one day, and I understand that with that comes this duty. And one of those necessary evils, if you like, is dealing with the press.
Whether they like it or not, photography is an important part of the royal inheritance. And in keeping with many aspects of their lifestyle, the attention of royal photographers comes as a privilege and a burden, but not something they can ever choose to ignore.
It's annoying to have to acknowledge these people, that these people are in your life and will be forevermore, just like television's in your life and will be forevermore. And so it's a constant struggle.
In a way, the press pack that follows them is the royal family's greatest nightmare. But if they didn't do that, that would be the royal family's greatest nightmare, because then the public would turn around and say, exactly what do you do for our taxpayers' money again?
Baby, you don't know what you're saying.
A journey no group has ever made. Africa at its toughest next here on 2. Meanwhile, over on BBC 4 now, Jack Dee is going for the let's have a punch-up at an awards ceremony approach to career building. Good move.
You're taking